Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's panel, Behind the Gauntlet, Making Spellbreak with the Proletariat team. If you've never heard of Spellbreak before, it's a third-person action spellcasting game where you take on the role of a powerful battle mage and master the elements while fighting against other players. Spellbreak is newly released. It's free to play and currently available to download on PC, PS4, Xbox, and Switch, and is cross-platform, cross-party, and cross-progression, so you can play with your friends. My name is Jenny Shu. I'm a producer on the project, and I'm here to host the panel today. We have lots of content to go over, but before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to our panelists. So panelists, we're going to get started today with 2 questions. First, I'd like you to tell me your name and what you do on the project, and then I'd like you to tell me what your favorite class is in Spellbreak. Let's get started with you, Seth.
So I'm Seth Sivak. I'm the CEO here for Proletariat. My job mostly on the project is I do a good amount of the publishing stuff these days, some of the design and some of the narrative work. My favorite class is Stone Shaper and always has been since way back in the times we're going to talk about later on today. I've always been a Stone Shaper main, so that's still my favorite class, and I'll just leave it with buff Stone Shaper.
Great, Damon.
Hi, my name is Damon Yanazelli. I'm the art director for the studio and for Spellbreak. I'm also one of the co-founders of the studio with a couple of these other rogues in the gallery here. And let's see, my favorite class is the toxicologist class, because I'm not that great at Spellbreak, but it's sort of like the class that kind of rewards sneaking around and being invisible, and it's kind of my jam. Hiding till that circle closes at the end, and then trying to just poison people as best I can and whatnot.
Pro strats, Cardell.
Hi, my name is Cardell Kerr. I am the executive producer over here at Proletariat. My day-to-day often just entails trying to make sure that nothing that's on fire burns too brightly for us to actually put it out, and also to make sure we hit all of our deadlines with grace and ease. That second one I'm still working on. My favorite class is the Conduit. I'm really bad at the Conduit, I'll be very, very clear. However, I just love the way the class progresses, and I feel that if you are good at Spellbreak, the Conduit is like an apex predator, so I'm a fan.
Last but certainly not least, Jesse.
Yeah. My name is Jesse Kurlanchik. I'm the design director here, one of the co-founders. My day-to-day is largely writing emails and talking with people about everything. It's fun. It's very tiring, but I love it a whole bunch. My favorite class is good. I'm going to throw some shade. We started with the easy to use classes, and now we're going to progress to the harder to use classes. My favorite aspirational class is Tempest. I'm not a good Tempest player, but the things that it can do when in the hands of someone that's really good at the game are amazing, and I want to be that good one day.
Great. So to get started, we just launched Spellbreak. We're newly launched, and it's only been just over a week. Seth, can you talk to us a little bit about the initial reception in terms of installs?
Yeah, it's been really exciting so far. We publicly announced the 2 million players. That's more than just installs. That's actual players getting into the game, and that's incredibly exciting to see. I mean, I think it shows a lot of the community that we've built and how much support we've had over time, and we're seeing really great, amazing things come out from the influencers and content creators. We've been watching just these incredible plays, and to Jesse's point, super high skill cap gaming that we've been seeing, which is awesome and really helped drive the initial momentum behind the launch, and that's really exciting. And the important thing though is we're just getting started. This is just the beginning of where we want to go. But 2 million, having 2 million players in 5 days is pretty incredible. So it's very exciting for all of us.
So one of the reasons I think that we've been so successful right at launch is that it was really important for us to launch with cross-platform. Cardell, can you tell us a little more about what cross-platform is and why it was important to us to launch Spellbreak with this?
So since Proletariat started, even before I got here, it's always been about community. And as one of the things about the games industry that I think is very important for anyone to recognize is that everything changes pretty much on a yearly basis and not even a monthly basis. If you consider a few years ago, Fortnite was one of the very first titles to do this, and there are a bunch of people who have formed their own groups around this without the concept of all having to be on the same device. We want Spellbreak to be a community-driven game. And because of that fact, that means that we want everyone who has been in these disparate communities to be able to play this same game with the same experience together with all their friends, regardless of the platform they're on. So really focusing on cross-play, cross-party, cross-progression. That's how we wanted to ensure that everyone could play with your friends regardless of what systems they had.
So speaking of being community-driven, Proletariat, we've been around as a studio for over 7 years now. And from the very beginning, we spent a lot of time live streaming on Twitch. Jesse, can you tell us about how this excitement on Twitch that we're seeing with the Spellbreak reception, what does that mean for the studio?
So I'll make this very personal at first, then I'll expand out to talking about the studio as a whole. So when we launched, we did not do any paid campaigns with the streamers, and it's a little bit nail biting. You're wondering, is anyone pick it up? Is anybody going to know about it? Or are we just going to launch and then go away? No, we launched. People noticed very, very quickly. It started. You'd see a stream with 1,000 viewers, and that's really exciting. Then you'd see a stream with like 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 viewers. Then you'd see multiples of those happening at once. And I was watching streamers who I had been watching for years and years, just because I enjoyed them playing our game. And then we would send a message, be like, "Hey, you're really psyched you're playing the game. Like, hop in with us." And I would get a little bit fanboy. I would have a little bit of a moment where I'm like, "Oh, I gotta play this. Cool. I don't want to give anything away here. I'm a very professional developer. I'm not gonna." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, let's just talk for a little bit longer." And yeah, I think it's been great. They still, watching the Twitter feeds of the streamers as they're going live, and they're like, checking out Spellbreak today, coming back to Spellbreak today, still playing Spellbreak, and it's fantastic. Love it.
I feel like we've seen live streaming really change the landscape of gaming over the past few years. Is there anything about Spellbreak's gameplay in particular you think that makes it really successful on Twitch for live streaming?
So it is eminently watchable. So if you look at games that get big on Twitch, I have to be able to drop in, look at the screen, see how the player is doing, see what they're doing, see how they're playing, apply that to how I want to play. And Spellbreak, you can put someone in front of a stream, and pretty quickly they'll realize if someone's doing well, if they're not doing well, how they're playing. The colors are very bright. It's very vibrant. There's not a lot of downtime where you're sort of hiding in a bush or waiting for the other person to take their turn or whatever. It's very visceral. Chat gets really excited about it. You can see the progression, of course, the match. The player going from relatively low powered to ridiculous over the course of 10 or 12 minutes, and it's it makes for these compelling stories that are very very bite sized. I can watch you stream for a couple of minutes and be like, that was really satisfying. I feel like I have now enjoyed that thing, and I can stop or I can keep going. I think it fits the Twitch ecosystem pretty well in that regard.
So we started as a mobile studio, found some moderate success with World Domination, moved into the PC space with Streamline. With Spellbreak, we went way more ambitious. We're seeing, multiple consoles, PC. The team has expanded from almost 30 people at the start of the project to almost 100 people now. Seth, can you tell us a little bit about why did we get so ambitious with Spellbreak? What was the path from being a mobile studio to a studio that's growing, trying to ship a AAA title?
Yeah, it's I think for us the question coming out of Streamline was really like what lessons have we learned and where we want to go with this. And I think we felt like it wasn't like hey, we should move back into mobile. I think that there are some great mobile games out there, but it was one of those things where we felt like that was going to be tough for us to compete there. Just knowing how much capital we had, the budget we had for our games, that sort of thing. And at the time, I still remember putting together a pitch deck where I was going through and I looked back at the original pitch deck from 2013, and of the 50 top grossing games, this was in 2017, 30 of them were still in top grossing. And so it was one of those things where they get so entrenched that it's really hard to compete, especially as a new studio like us, building a new IP. And we didn't want to go the license route or anything like that. And so the The thing with Spellbreak was, I mean, I remember sitting down to kind of take a look at it, and we were having a bunch of conversations of like, okay, we know the DNA of the studio is large scale, innovative multiplayer games. Like that's, we like the team came from MMOs and like those types of games, large scale social games. Like that's the type of stuff we knew we were good at. And starting to think about, this was way before sort of crossplay was even really a thing, in late 2016. But we started to look at like what were the interesting multiplayer things that were happening in the space right now, like what was going to be coming next, and building off of the lessons we learned from Streamline, it was like, okay, we know we want the game to be really watchable. We know that like the ability to create content with the game is going to be critical. And we just started to seek out, I think, the different opportunities we thought were available. I mean, some of the lessons we learned through Streamline was really around like, hey, we knew we wanted to probably make a PvP game to start. We knew that was going to be a place where we could get a lot of depth, because the biggest thing I think we heard from Streamline was there wasn't enough depth. It was one of those things where someone couldn't play it 60 hours a week. And so, and stream it 60 hours a week, right? Because I think like starting content creators, sadly, like oftentimes do stream that much, right? And so we knew that we would have to build a game that would have that level of depth. And so that's when we started to kind of put together our thoughts around like, what's the next thing coming? And that's where we started to do the early concepts for what would eventually become Spellbreak.
So before Spellbreak was Spellbreak, it was also known as Ragnarok, and then later Longshot. Cardell, can you walk us through when was the first pitch and what did the game look like back then?
So I'm trying to think. So I want to say it was March 2017, maybe around there, roughly, where we were looking around, as Seth already mentioned, we were canvassing the terrain, and we decided, okay, we are going to build 2 prototypes, and these 2 prototypes, completely different games, it'll be great, you're going to love it. And one of those groups decided to build almost a melee-based Valhalla-driven BR, and it was dubbed Ragnarok. And there were a lot of very tall, very chiseled, very very oily men running around, stabbing each other with swords. And the other one was dubbed Throne. And we basically we prototyped it as a Dota mod, actually, which I believe actually is still available. And Jesse, is it still? Oh, all right, it's done. It's over. It's finished.
It's canceled.
It's good. No, it's good. We had it up running.
We still get questions about it.
Oh, well, that's true. But again, it's one of those examples of there are 2 very different games. So Throne, for example, was a much more isometric style game since it was done as a Dota mod. It was done much more top down. You had a lot more BR problems you had to really resolve because most BRs are typically first person or maybe third person, versus Ragnarok had the problem of being melee driven. And for the longest time, we spent a good chunk of energy just trying to figure out which one of these games do we think we as a studio have the appropriate skill set, DNA, interest to build. And I want to say it was in July of that year. We had it booked, gonna make a decision, and the decision we made was that we would continue progress on Ragnarok for a while to try to figure out how we could resolve the problems there. And for the most part, Throne just kind of coasted because it was already fairly encapsulated. It had its own lobby system, 10 to 20 players could play against each other, and you could just add more content to it as time went on. So one of the things that really encapsulated the Ragnarok experience was very much be a Viking, fight your way into Valhalla. And we really wanted a almost Dark Souls-esque melee system that could really feel, very, very tactical, very engaging for anyone to play. That way, to Seth's point, streamers could spend 60 hours on Steam just trying to learn all the ins and outs and when you should be dodging versus when you should be blocking versus when you should be attacking. And that was hard. And to Damon's point previously, things get very complex, and trying to find a way to deal with a combat system that was engaging on a 1v1 basis, it's all wonderful when you finally do that. But since you're making a multiplayer PvP experience, it falls apart the instant 3 or 4 more people run in behind you, because what was once tactical engaging is now basically button mashy and just blocking forever until eventually someone from a distance pulls out a bow and arrow and shoots you all, and that's the end of it. So that would be the quick breakout of some of the challenges we had, and we spent a lot of time just trying to solve those problems over the next few months.
Yeah, I mean, I think about this a lot in terms of, there was a couple of things I think were really important. There was like this crystallizing moment that we had a conversation about Battle Royale. And this was before PUBG had launched, right? And this was this was still when H1Z1 was kind of the dominant Battle Royale game. And we were thinking about like, okay, I remember having, I think it was this conversation with you, Cardell, where it was like, I think that Battle Royales are really multiplayer roguelikes for people who don't play roguelikes. And so we started to settle in on that idea, and we were like, hey, is there something we can do that's a little bit more roguelike-y here, which is where we really started to get into kind of like the skill and spell drafting that would eventually become, I think, what is our class system. And that was really heavily experimented on in Throne because it was much faster to do it there, while the third person like action combat was much more in the Ragnarok prototype. And it was interesting because I think the original idea was to like do the two different prototypes, take things we liked about both of them, smash them together. Because that was basically the process we did for World's Domination for about like 6 or 8 weeks to kind of get the core gameplay for that game. And I think that was, the original piece that we were thinking about for the game itself. And, with Ragnarok, I often wonder where we would be if we had just like we went through, I think, 3 full iterations of melee combat. And at any point there was just like head in our hands, like this is, we're never going to fix this. And it was because, the initial iteration was too skillful. Like it didn't matter the items you picked up, none of the randomness of Battle Royale mattered. If the other person was better than you wouldn't even get a hit off. Like they would parry every single attack. And then we swung the complete opposite direction, and it was just rock, paper, scissors. And we were like, nope, this also is bad. And then we kind of tried to be somewhere in the middle, and we're like, no, this still isn't good. And then we ran into all these issues of like, still my favorite 2 issues were during playtests when we realized one thing where like you'd square off 1v1. And Cardell and I would be fighting, and Damon would just walk up behind me and just like hit me once with a sword and kill me. And it was just like, and we had this elaborate, I still remember the animation. I wonder if we can actually find a video, but like we had this elaborate like unsheathing your sword animation, because you would like put your sword away to run. And so you'd like go into a big fight, and then some idiot would just come from the side and just like kill you immediately because you weren't even looking at them. And the other problem we had is that since it's a battle royale and it's kind of open worldy, you're not like protecting an objective, people would just like run away from you indefinitely. And if you had no ranged options, you couldn't do anything. So we eventually gave people the ability to like throw their swords and their shields, and then you miss and not have a weapon. And it was just like, we could go on for hours about all the challenges in doing melee well, a melee only battle royale, because I think we found them all. But then, that's eventually when we led into starting to do more stuff with ranged and, bows and arrows and stuff like that eventually would turn into what is Spellbreak.
Yeah, I guess I'll even jump on top of that. And then there's the thematic problem of just Ragnarok. It's supposed to be a bunch of Vikings fighting each other, as opposed to a bunch of Vikings running away and trying to find bushes to hide in to then stab each other in secrecy. And that thematic problem was one of those ones that it was just, no matter what you look at, you just couldn't solve it. It was just a situation where we need to change this game. It can't be Ragnarok. I think Longshot is a better option. It gives us more options, gives us more freedom.
Ragnar, run! Yeah.
No, Ragnar, hide behind a rock, and then you wait until the person came to the side. But yeah, that was the other reason as to why we ultimately shifted. Longshot as a concept just gave us more freedom. It didn't mean as much. It didn't come preloaded with concepts, and it gave us the freedom of creative expression to drive the game more in the areas that we thought would be more interesting.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. I feel like I'm still stuck on Cardell's pitch of oily Viking men with swords. Like, how was that not compelling? How did that not work? So I feel like this seems like a really good segue into the actual revamp of Spellbreak, because, it started off as Ragnarok, very hyper-realistic art style, Vikings, melee focused, hit a lot of problems. We were almost about a year into development before we decided to take it into the direction that is now Spellbreak. Damon, can you walk us through what that major revamp looked like?
Sure, yeah. So as you mentioned, like Ragnarok was this kind of somewhat photoreal, but like slightly exaggerated proportions and stuff, kind of, Frazetta-esque oily Vikings.
I'm sorry, Damon, I apologize.
So Ragnarok gradually transitioned into a slightly more Arthurian version of basically the same thing, and that's when we changed the game's name to this working title to Longshot. And we didn't change too much about the sort of thoughts on the art style, aside from the notionality that this time the characters would be wearing shirts. and there were like bows and arrows and stuff like that, but it was still generally pretty realistic. And to be completely transparent, we wanted to try and do more with less, for lack of a better phrase. And we were like, all right, we're going to just like buy some photoreal assets, off of these various, asset stores. Cause like photoreal assets are a dime a dozen nowadays. And we'll just change them a little bit, we'll give our trees a little bit of more twist, and then, we'll still build our characters, kind of custom and everything. And that's how we'll do this. We'll make this sort of more palpably kind of real world. It's sort of a slight fantasy exaggeration. So we're doing that. I had a kid. He's awesome. And I went on to a bit of paternity leave, kind of late, to after my wife went back to work. And I came back, and over the like the last weekend that I was gone, Dan Ogles, who's our head of, what's his title? Gameplay director now. Yeah, gameplay director. Chief Noodler. Had basically over one weekend sort of turned the game into a magic shooter. It was these characters were sort of they were no longer using swords and shields. They were using magical spells that looked like a bunch of garbage effects that you could buy from asset stores and everything. It was lightning bolts and fireballs were pretty much there already. And we had dual wielding, also, already, and it was still in the sort of like weird photoreal map, but now it was with these like super blocky stick figure characters. And I came in and they're like, "This is it. This is what we're doing now. We're doing this like magic combat game." And I was like, "What?" Like, it always takes a while to sort of reframe when you've spent that much time sort of like thinking about how you're going to sort of work on something else, and you're like, "Oh, I spent all this time like trying to make this thing good. Now you're just going to pull the carpet out from under us." But anyway, the combat was much faster. It was magic based, and so it kind of implied that it needed something a little bit more fantastic from a visual standpoint. That like just simply, for whatever reason, in my mind, a photoreal or more realistic looking magic combat game was going to involve wizards with big sleeves in their hands and doing this and stabs, and that didn't really. I just didn't love that idea in my mind. So we started sort of thinking about different visual looks and things. So some of the folks, actually all the founders, I guess, really, we have a little bit of experience working with some cell rendered kind of visual styles in the past. I love anime, specifically from the 1980s and 90s, and all the sort of corresponding, Saturday morning cartoons, He-Man as well, all that sort of stuff. So we kind of took our past experience and and past interests and dove into the notion of doing like sort of cell shaded characters and kind of like impressionistic looking painterly backgrounds, and then very specifically trying to nail the feel of sort of hand animated, very sort of like intentionally driven frame to frame kind of animation in our visual effects. And let's see, so that was late 2018 it was late 2018 that I came back and we sort of started thinking about that. And then we basically decided we were going to go to GDC with 2 demos.
Sorry, it was late 2017.
Oh, late 2017.
Sorry, late 2017. Early 2018, we're going to go to GDC with 2 demos. One, a gameplay demo that was going to involve a lot of prototype assets and things. And then one that would be sort of a visual target demo. So over the course of about 8 weeks, we designed and built kind of this small slice of gameplay. The art team did the whole thing, so it looked beautiful, but it performed terribly from a frame rate standpoint. But we more or less, we built a version of the forebear, the sort of first character in Spellbreak. We made one magic spell. She was like running around, and we had this like super sweet looking like post-process filter that made the whole background look very painterly. And that is more or less what the game still looks like. We've taken that particular visual target and we've cleaned it up a lot for performance reasons and for to make it sort of multiplayer friendly so that people feel like they have the precision that they want in a multiplayer game. But that was pretty much it. And I think that was, honestly, I mean, that was the first time the art team, which was only 6 people at the time, really suddenly kind of came alive and got excited about what we'd been doing with Ragnarok to Long Shot to Spellbreak. Because now we sort of had I think at that point we sort of finally felt like we were creating something new and unique that was ours and wasn't maybe derivative of what a lot of other approaches might have looked like.
So there's a huge pivot here with both the visual style and the gameplay. Seth, was this a contentious decision that was made within the studio? And were there any, really difficult decisions that had to be made when it transitioned from Ragnarok to Spellbreak?
Yeah, I mean, doing reboots is always really hard. Like even rebooting the kind of like melee combat stuff when we were doing it, which I would say that the very first version of this like magical shooter that Damon mentioned still had melee. We had like a dark magic lightsaber, so that was still a thing. But it's definitely really hard. It was one of those things too where you feel like you start working on a direction with a prototype and you're like, it's getting better, right? And you never know when you're gonna like. It's really, there's a moment when you feel it where you're like, yep, this is actually gonna work, but you don't know how long it's gonna take to get to that point. And so it's really hard to go backwards because we had this melee prototype, this like mixed, it was kind of like it was bows and arrows, and it was some melee stuff, swords and shields, and it was kind of getting better. We had like early versions of the class system. We had this like shrine and quest system that turned into a little bit of the inspiration for what are now eventually mana vaults, and probably some additional gameplay we'll do sometime in the future. But that sort of stuff was starting to come together, and we're like, hey, this is actually getting kind of cool. And then we're just like, oh, we're just going to throw that all away again and go back. And so that's always really painful because it can be really hard to split the difference on, do I not like this because I was getting used to the other game, or do I not like this because it's actually not good? And that's actually surprisingly difficult to tell. But with Spellbreak, we, the early stuff with the magic was the game was faster too. Like you moved faster. The jump was very floaty. So it was really the first few games were basically everyone bunny hopping around each other, shooting fireballs at the ground. Which again, like it takes a while for a game to get fun. So it was like weeks of that. But it was really until we got to there was a moment there when we started to mix the spells. When we got to like the poison spray, which at the time was like kind of a flamethrower almost. Like it was like a spray. It just kind of was pretty random. It was like very only close range, but it would leave puddles behind. And we were like, hey, wouldn't that be cool if those things interacted? And we actually put that in so you could make Dragonfire. And it was like, that was the moment where you could mix those two together. And we're like, we think we have something here. And that was when we started to do a lot of the team deathmatch testing on the core combat that would build out like the rest of because, like I mentioned at the time, we had like this like dark magic disc spell. We had a light magic, Hammer of Dawn style, like laser from above. And so we went through tons of iteration. The lightning sorcery changed a bunch over time. I think the only thing that really didn't change much was probably the Fireball and Ice Lance, because Ice Lance is the kind of like charge up spell for the long range one, was pretty much unchanged. I think almost everything else went through significant iteration. Like Stone, probably the most out of all of them. Stone or Wind, probably.
Wind, yeah.
And obviously we cut a bunch of those elements because you don't see the like dark magic or light magic in the game currently. And so, but that stuff, yeah. So it's always a really hard decision, but I can tell you, like when we saw I still remember when Damon and Dan came to me with the first concept for the new art style. And I saw this image and I was like, that looks great, like as a concept image, but like, what is the game actually going to look like? And Damon was like, I think we can make it look like this. And I looked at Dan, and Dan's like,
it's gonna look like this.
Yeah. Dan was like, it's going to look like that. And I was like,
I'll believe it when I see it.
I think you're full of, I don't know if I could swear on here. I think you're full of crap. And so, and also you have 6 weeks, so go ahead. And they pulled it off. And like the moment people saw that diorama, like where you could run around in there, people were immediately enamored with the art style. It was like, we knew it. People were just like, oh my God, this is so unique and different. And these characters don't look like old Gandalf mages. They're like these athletes that are like literally hurling fireballs, and that was super visceral. And And yeah, it was just like we're onto something. And so you can feel that start to click together. And of course, like that was in early 2018. So you can tell the like road it takes to actually get to a final game. And when I say final, I mean like the start of the game being live now for what will hopefully be for years to come. So yeah, it's a lot to go back and actually do a reset, because you end up having to throw away everything. And that can be really painful, because as Damon mentioned, you know, and I think you did too, Jenny, it was like a year of pre-production, prototyping, concepting, and we just like threw it all away, quote unquote. But I mean, it's part of the creative process, right? That you're going to go through stuff and have to kill it. And that's, I think, the more, I guess, experience you get, the more comfortable you get with that. But it's always really hard, because it's so hard to go back when you feel like you've made any progress, because games are so hard to make, especially like new gameplay paradigms, like what we're trying to do with the spellcasting and Spellbreak. So yeah.
I remember that GDC slice like so clearly. I remember, you know, you're loading in and it's this forest setting with these little fireflies floating around, and it's this really beautiful space, and you run up the hill and you see another battle mage. And I remember Damon working on the VFX for the lightning sorcery, I think, at that point. And I just remember, you know, walking through that internally and being like, wow, that was a moment for me where I was like, okay, I believe in this project. I cannot wait to work on this more. Jesse, as a co-founder and the design director, what was your take on this turning point for Spellbreak?
I think you guys have both hit it. It is a game, or at that point, it was a game where a month or two before this, people would see it and then kind of like squint their eyes. You'd be like, I don't know, maybe this might be interesting. There's some things you kind of play around. And you're like, I don't know, it's kind of fun. Maybe there's something there. And you flash forward 3 months and you go through the diorama or you go through the playable slice, and people were like blown away by it. You could look at the art style. You could go through the whole, was it Beautiful Corner? What was it called?
Yeah, we call it the Beautiful Corner.
And you could be like, oh yeah, I could live in this world.
Beautiful like acre or two.
Yeah. There's a little castle, a little hill, a little overlook, hamlet. And you'd be like, I could buy this world being a thing one day. And then when you go through the gameplay demo, you were basically presented with this very, very wide array. And I think we have video of this still. This very, very wide array of different equipment, different what would now be runes, different gauntlets, a very strange skill system that was off to the side that you could customize yourself with. And you could come out of that and you'd be like, one, I just had fun. We just had a fight against, 5, 10, 20 people. And it was visceral. It was I felt tactical. Like I felt like I was making interesting decisions through the whole thing. I felt like I could get better at it, or I could, shake my fist at the sky for being unlucky. And then I would want to think about what I could do better. So I would sit then look at that array of choices and be like, I don't know if the lightning and the poison gauntlet are the best combo. Maybe I'll try this rune instead, or these skills instead. And people would be around the office having these arguments. They would have these very heated arguments after a playtest of, this build is broken, this build is trash, I like this skill, no, I like this skill. And you could, if you flash forward, 2.5 years and look at Reddit or Discord now, you see these same type of arguments happening. And it's, as a designer, as someone that likes playing very systemic games, that's the kind of stuff I love. And having that sort of suffuse the studio as a whole really sort of gave us a great deal of confidence, I think, in the direction.
So that's a great recap of the pre-production stages of Spellbreak. The next major milestone that we hit was Alpha, which we had on PC, and then later on the beta that we had on both PC and PS4. Cardell, can you walk us through what those phases looked like?
So June 2018 was when Alpha started. So at that point in time...
Technically pre-Alpha?
Oh, pre-alpha. I'm sorry.
Alpha, the one in February. Right?
Oh, right. So that was pre-alpha. I apologize. To me, I guess it all blends together into one. You might see this as a theme for the rest of this conversation, actually. It all blends together because my main focus was, okay, we are developing a core game. And this is something that a lot of people in the studio have done before, but a lot of people hadn't done before. And it was more just how do we make sure we keep making additions to this game that are both good and don't break the game fundamentally to stop people from giving us feedback. And I remember distinctly reaching out to all of my production friends and asking them, how would you do weekly updates to a core game? And their first response was, I wouldn't. Why would you do that? That just seems like a horrible idea. This seems like, why would you do that? I was like, okay, but seriously, if you had to, or if that was a thing, how would you do it? And they basically said, well, you're gonna get one try at almost everything you do, so you need to be very confident that one shot is going to work for you. So when we went into pre-alpha, we were updating the game once a week. And some of those were balance changes.
I think back to that now, and I'm just like, how did we ever do that? Like,
Trust
considering,
me. Yeah.
I mean, well, like, there's no way you could do it with a cross-platform game. Like, that's just
No.
impossible. But like, man, that is hard.
It was crazy. I feel like I was the producer helping with release at that time, and I blocked that out of my memory. It was a very stressful time, but very fun and exciting.
I mean, it basically is a microcosm where we are right now, where, the very first pre-alpha, we made it available. We had no idea who was going to show up. We had no idea what they would do with the game. When we first started playing with random strangers online, we were all way better than them, and we were just destroying them routinely. And then give it a week or two, and next thing you know, I had a good match with someone online, and then a week or two after that, I can't even play with these randos. They're just destroying me consistently, and I need to find a way to either quit my job and play this more often, or I just need to stop playing. But that was effectively the early definition of what I would say pre-alpha is. And again, like when you were looking at alpha, to Seth's point, and I guess I want to even maybe go back to one of the earlier points made of just building and polishing a game is difficult. And you were constantly warring with the tension of, am I just not trying hard enough? Should I just try harder to make this fun, interesting, exciting, accessible? Or is there something fundamentally wrong with the problem I'm trying to solve? And should I just throw it on the floor and scrap it and redo it? And we had a few of these, and I imagine Jesse will talk about them. But really, that's what pre-alpha, alpha, and beta were for. They were really for us to try these systems, polish these systems, really feel out the possibility space, and then be honest about the fact of, well, how can we either make the system work, or how can we get the benefits of the system by throwing away some of the complexities that we'd carried with us.
So we were playing with the community for a long time before full launch. So full launch was September 2020. Pre-alpha started June of 2018, because it was really important to us to always get the input from the community early on. Damon, is there any moment that sticks out to you in particular with those early play tests with real players, that made you feel like we might be onto something special with Spellbreak?
I can't think of like any one specific anecdote from alpha, except for like watching people just like hit like, if there was like a 5-point shot in basketball, hitting like 10-point shots with the boulder from like mega distant, like thousands of yards away, and being like, Kobe! Just stuff like that. Just seeing like what, creators and influencers were starting to do, just, in terms of like the sick play. Because I was, from an art direction standpoint, I was like focused like this, like how do we make this little, smoke cloud feel a little bit more diaphanous as you look through it? And, we already had players kind of, putting together like crazy sizzle reels of gameplay. So that was, all of that sort of just watching the community kind of like, start to create content with this sort of like, with what we built was the amazing part to me.
Seth, would you say that there was, any big moment that happened during alpha or beta?
I don't think so. I mean, it's definitely a challenge to keep a game live this long. I mean, there's a reason why games don't do it, right? Like we did something that was very non-traditional here, and who knows? We'll look back on this in a year or two and decide if it was the right move. Where we kept the game up like 24/7 during these long windows, and that's asking a lot, especially for something that's like a battle royale game where you have a really large lobby that needs to be full. The experience could be a little bit rough waiting for, because it's funny, we're playing now and you're waiting like less than 60 seconds to get into a match, where you could be waiting 5-10 minutes to get into a match during like the alpha. And so we actually in the pre-alpha, we had to have dedicated playtest times because there were so few people with keys that we need to like get everyone in at the right time in order to actually play. And so the challenge in running these is just like, it's a lot to be building the game as well as iterating on the gameplay, as well as figuring out like, how are we going to market this? What's the audience going to be? And those types of things. Cause you're that was something that I think it's just you're trying to do everything all at once. And I think it is one of the reasons why we went with actually having chunks of downtime in between the beta periods is because we like needed the break. We couldn't continue to. It was so hard to run the game live as well as build the game for some of these like massive features that we had left to add. And so I think the only sort of like, I guess like moments for me, I'm trying to think of like if there's anything that was like, oh God type of moments, but there was definitely a few.
I have lots of those.
So I have one for you.
You should go ahead then, because I was like, I can't really think of one.
So the one that jumps to mind, actually, I guess I'll jump back, 5 or 6 months ago, was in February, beginning of March, and we're going to our first cert for PS4, and there was a rash of very, very tense meetings about what do we put in this last cert build, because we need to put something in the cert build and it needs to be as polished and as solid as we can possibly make it. But we've been deliberately trying to hold back on putting a lot of polish because you don't want to break anything in any form of halo effects. That to me was the biggest uh-oh moment I could think of back then. I would argue even launching as effectively is just a ripple of that moving forward, because it was the same thing, just cross-platform.
I mean, even just like, I think some of the biggest stuff was around like just as we were really trying to build momentum around the game in October of 2018, where we were like really needed to get momentum in because we wanted to move the game forward. And I remember there was this like, we had set up a whole bunch of kind of like Hail Marys of like, what do we do about this if we can't really continue to get momentum for the game? Because we brought the game to pitch for a bunch of partners. People couldn't really see it. It was, I think, like a tough game to really wrap your head around. There was also just like an overwhelming onslaught, I think, of Battle Royale games getting pitched. So it was hard for us to stand out, even with the cool art style. Like, that was one of the things that we would get for feedback was people being like, wow, you guys are at least trying to do something really different. But there was, I remember deciding, we wanted to get a trailer out. We're like, we have to do something. And so we cut this, Gordon, our who was like on the community side and now is on the marketing side for us, like ended up cutting this trailer that was just 90 seconds of just gameplay because we had zero budget and zero time to do anything else. But that gameplay was, to Damon's point, like these incredible highlights of our pre-alpha players doing crazy things. And we sort of were just like straight up, like honest with the community. That's what this is going to be. You get 90 seconds of pre-alpha gameplay. That's it. And we put it up on YouTube and it went super viral. But that was very much a like, oh God, like we need to continue to build momentum. Like what can we come up with really quickly? Because we had to keep moving. And so that was definitely one of those moments where it was just like, we were trying to come up with all these ideas that we could find to get people to notice and care about the game, which is I think like a massive struggle for any new IP, right?
So early on, like Cardell said before, we were shipping new content every week. It was really important for us to, iterate really quickly. But that, of course, meant that there were a lot of bugs that were out in the wild early on. Jesse, do you have any favorite bugs from alpha or beta?
There are lots of bugs. There are lots and lots of bugs. I could take them as some of the moments of some of the stuff we put in for a day or 3 days before we're like, no, that has to get pulled right out. Let's go with favorites, though. We do weekly updates. The entire company sits together once a week. We get a big update on where everything is. There's always the bug of the week in those, which are often very funny, or at least visually entertaining. But I think one of the best quote bugs that we had was we had wind jumping. So if you shot wind at the ground, you'd bounce up, and we had the tornado that had a pretty strong pull at that point, and it had a lot more physical effects than it does today, where if you were running close to it, you could slingshot yourself around it. And if you wind jumped at the right point while you're running past it or in the middle of it or something, you would launch way, way, way up into the air. Like we're talking right now, if you're playing Spellbreak, if you fly and just go straight up, yeah, you could go farther, much farther, much farther. And so we were fixing this. We're like, this is not something that can stay in the game. It is incredibly broken. But what we realized was actually kind of fun to launch yourself out of your tornadoes. And so we then made it into what is now Updraft. So you you could use a skill to replicate this bug's behavior to a much more reasonable level. And so you take this
a game designer sanctioned height.
Well, like a little bit farther. You go a little bit higher than you really should be able to go, because when you do it, you want to feel like a badass battle mage. And so there's a lot of things that happen, sort of happy accidents to Bob Rossett.
So that's really funny to hear about, bugs that ended up being happy accidents and then got in the game. But early on in development, in any game development cycle, there's a lot of ideas that are being generated and, they never end up seeing the light of day. Are there any, favorite things or ideas that you guys had early on that you wanted to put in Spellbreak that never got into the game? Damon, let's start with you.
Well, back in Ragnarok, we had vehicles, but what kind of vehicle does a Viking ride? A bear. Imagine being an oiled, muscly Frazetta Viking bearing down on your opponent on a bear. That was pretty great. To be fair, like we never actually made that. That was like literally like, Seth, look at this drawing. It's gonna be great, right? And that idea transplanted to Spellbreak was, we have talked about vehicles in the past. They were, they never got past the sort of like napkin sketch where I was like, Seth, look at this. This means something. And he's like, that looks like a circle and a square. What is that? And I was like, these are vehicles for battle mages. Anyway, so that I would love to have revisited that particular idea. I think the thing that actually used to be in the game that like we don't have anymore that I miss is we used to have these just mega screen filling explosions to things, and they looked awesome. They were unfortunately not fun when you got hit by them at all. So we kind of had to scale our, the visual effects used to be just uncontrollably opaque and large. We had to scale a lot of that back during development. And I do remember fighting Dan specifically on that a number of times. He'd be like, players don't really like not being able to see things when they get hit by a boulder. I'm like, what do you mean? Didn't they see how awesome that explosion was? Oh, I guess it's a little big. I guess we should fix it. Okay, we'll do something that's a little more transparent and has the spirit still. So that's one of the things I miss. We used to base, the boulder used to just like keep growing and growing and growing and create like a football field sized, American football sized explosion. And it looked awesome for a video, but it was not enjoyable to play.
I really think that there's more we can be doing with stuff like being able to freeze a poison cloud. Like one of the funniest bugs we had is the ability that you would just like create frozen poison clouds up in the air and climb them. And then they would, the ones below would go away, but they wouldn't fall. So you would just like, climb up until the top of the skybox, right? And we finally eventually fixed that, right? I'm pretty sure we fixed that.
Yes, it has been fixed.
But that was, those types of things I thought were really cool. And so that some of those iterations, like I would love to do things that more deform or impact the environment. And so that was stuff that I always thought was really awesome.
Well, we used to even have like environmental versions of the elements around. We had like water puddles and specific like
they were just like
fire torches or things.
Flames.
They were essentially
barrels that would catch on fire, things like that.
Yeah, element generators that you could like sort of interact with and produce some of those interactions in the gameplay space too. Yeah.
Spellbreak has been out for just over a week. And like Seth said, we're upwards of 2 million players at this point, which is just mind-blowing. This is a huge personal moment for everyone involved on the project. This represents years of hard work. I would love to hear what launch has meant to you all so far. Jesse, you want to kick us off?
So I'm going to get emotional. It's going to be a process.
Told you, warm fuzzies.
Yeah, warm fuzzies. It's true. So there's this. You see this in various games at various points in their communities, where it's usually around patches or some large undertaking where they say there's this little ASCII guy and he's got his hands out like this, and they say so and so take my energy, and we've been working a lot in the past few months and a lot in the past few weeks. And seeing the response to this is just like that multiplied by, 2 million or whatever, is that I'm not sleeping much these days. I wake up in the middle of the night being like, I could be doing something more. I need to be doing something. And I'll get up and start working. And I'll put a Twitch stream on in the background. and someone will be playing and chat will be excited about it. And everybody will be talking, and then I'll be like, oh, I was going to talk for a little bit, and then they'll get excited and I'll get more excited. And then all of a sudden I'm ready to go for the day. I'm like, all right, we're good. Let's go. My Twitter DMs, my Reddit messages, all these things are full of people asking questions, basically telling us what they like, what they don't like, giving us very critical feedback in some circumstances, a bunch of effusive praise in others. Searching Twitter for Spellbreak, you find all sorts of amazing things. Seth linked me a video today about a guy who he was capturing his wife's first game playing, and she never played competitive games really. And I was like, that's like my wife. She comes in. We're lucky she's not going to bust in the room at some point today. Be like, I found a bug. I need you to fix a bug right now. Getting text messages from all these friends from many, many moons ago. They're like, dude, your game's pretty good. I was like, oh, thanks, buddy. So it's been emotional. I have a little problem putting into proper words. I put PogChamp in a tweet and felt a little bit guilty about that earlier.
It feels good to share your baby with the world and not have people be like, your baby's a potato.
It's an ugly baby.
But Cardell, your baby is a potato.
True. It's true. That's definitely true.
Cardell, what has launch meant to you so far?
Again, I'm horrible at self-diagnosing, as you may have picked up from other conversations we've had here, and obviously as part of just general work. I actually, in the middle of a meeting on Tuesday, I asked, how does everyone feel right now? How are we supposed to feel right now? Because I don't know how I feel, and I don't have a way of measuring this, and I just don't know. So I will fall back to what is concrete. The fact that we launched on the 4 platforms with crossplay, cross progression, simultaneously, just the amount of teamwork it took for that, the amount of effort, the amount of very long days and very long nights. I'm just excited about the fact that it finally feels as if it's being rewarded. It's also a bonus that both of my children are playing relentlessly, so that's kind of nice as well. It's also a negative that they are probably better at the game than me at this point in time. So.
Gotta get good, Cardell.
It's true. I tell them that all the time. It's fair.
Seth, what has launch meant to you?
Yeah, I think these guys sort of nailed it. It's hard to properly articulate, I think, just because of the amount of work and passion that goes into a project like this. I mean, I really don't think that the industry talks about it enough of just how hard it is to make and ship any game. Finishing a project of this magnitude, starting a project is easy, but finishing a project of this magnitude is incredibly hard. And, I think going through on launch day, I went through with the whole team that sort of a very, very short pitch deck that just kind of went through all the things that we did that were really incredible that had nothing to do with what the outcome of the game would actually be, right? Shipping this game in 10 languages on 4 platforms in all of these international regions, with crossplay, with cross progression, with all of, and that's just that's so much to be proud of. We're blazing a way here where we built, and especially, if you had told me 8 years ago when we started this company that we would be, 8 years later, we would be 100 people shipping a AAA title on 4 platforms during the middle of a global pandemic and widespread social unrest, I would have been like, that is an oddly specific prediction. But it seems impossible, right? Because and that to me, the fact that we were able to do this, the fact that we were able to ship this at all, given all the challenges and all the work that everybody put in, it just is a testament, I think, to what the team was able to do. And for me, there's the gratifying moment is releasing something like this is a culmination of so much work, so much sacrifice, so much creativity, right? The amount of folks that have poured their creativity into this, and that I think is hard to properly articulate, right? It feels great. It's awesome. It's so satisfying for this to actually be out. It's so amazing that it was able to be built at all. And I feel at the end of the day, one of the things that I think is really important is just we have limited time. There's only, it took us nearly 4 years to make this game. So, how many games can I make in my lifetime? And I'm really genuinely very proud of what we built, because I think we made something that is beautiful and really fun and innovative and different. And that's really hard to do. And so, to me, it's the matter of releasing anything should feel incredible, and getting anything to this state. But what we were able to do and what we were able to do as a team, while growing and building a team, I can't properly explain how proud I am of all of it. And that's like this, the last few months, the last few weeks, watching the team come together to actually push through and like navigate this and do this. We're doing things that studios that have 5 times our size and 10 times our budget are like struggle to do, and we were able to pull it off. And that's something that just speaks to how awesome this team is, and it's been like the most exhilarating 6 months of my career in doing this stuff. And that's like saying a lot, because we all started the three, like Damon and Jesse, we're founders for this company. We've been through several near-death experiences where we almost ran out of business, right? And to say that like we're able to be at this point and it's still exciting, and all it does is just energize me further to see the feedback, to see the positivity, and the thing that's most fun to me is all these people, these new people that are joining Proletariat, immediately coming in, contributing, doing awesome stuff, and to see how happy and excited they are for this stuff is really like that to me. I love to see that. I love to see when people come in, they just start adding right away. They just start creating and building awesome stuff, and that's great.
So before we wrap up today's panel, let's do a lightning round of questions that we've gotten from our Discord community. So feel free to grab whichever question you like.
We can blaze these.
Yeah.
Like nobody's business.
So Flammable would like to know, will we add new gauntlets in the future?
Yes.
Yes.
Period. That's it.
I will talk more about this at a later time, but for the interest of brevity, yes.
All right. Alexis would like to know, how long does it take an outfit to design from start to implementation in game?
Let's see. It takes probably about a week or two to sort of come up with I actually don't even know how much time narrative spends with it, kind of coming up with the sort of idea outline, but drawing and designing the concept art for it is about a week to 2 weeks, depending on scope. And then from there, I think Jenny actually knows the answer better here. Is it roughly 6 weeks to model texture?
Yeah,
I would say that's my job.
Yeah.
It's 4 to 6 for 3D, depending on how complex it is.
So then 4 to 6 weeks. So we're at 8 weeks there, and then comes in, and at this point, rigging and getting it animated is only like a day or two. So roughly 8 weeks from start to finish.
Let's see. Queen Feliday would like to know, do you ever plan on adding more than just a battle royale game mode? Is there some sort of campaign or something that you're planning on doing?
I could take this one. Yeah, I mean, so we've tested additional like previous modes in the past, and so that's definitely something we want to bring back that's beyond battle royale. As far as campaign, like PvE, those types of things, like absolutely, like this core combat that we're building, we think is something that could grow for a long time, and we could do a variety of different game modes, both on the like competitive side, on the PvP side, on the PvE side, and that's all places we want to go with Spellbreak over the coming months and years. And the first place we're going to go is we're going to continue to add. I think Duos is going to be going live next for Battle Royale, and then we're going to start bringing in some limited time modes and some other modes that are kind of focused around that. But that's going to happen pretty quickly. Like that's in the near term. As far as things like PvE, that's going to take a little bit longer.
Katsuo would like to know, by any chance, will you be adding micro events during matches, like random elemental weather occurrences, which can help thin down the numbers?
So I can answer this one too. There's definitely more we want to do with environmental interactions. We already talked a little bit about this previously, like during this panel, and so yes, we want to add some of that stuff potentially back in. That's, I think, a huge opportunity for us to do things that are impactful and interesting based on where you are in the world. And the world is something that we want to continue to flesh out. Like the HoloLands is something that I think we want to continue to build and create new interesting experiences to happen there. So that's definitely something we're interested in doing.
I feel like I saw the light in Damon's eyes just dim when he realized how much work it would be.
No, I was in my mind. I was thinking when somebody said like elemental weather storms, I was thinking about like a storm cloud that just drops swords on everybody. I don't know why.
It's that Ragnarok theme coming back.
Yeah, that's the Ragnarok theme.
It brings bears. Just bears.
Yeah.
Just bears.
Just bears raining from the sky.
It's raining bears. Hallelujah.
Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time to answer all of these questions today and to give us a sneak peek behind the gauntlet. For those of you that have been excited to see what is coming next with Spellbreak, here's a little taste.